Everyone, this is Anna Finch from Finch Press. Hope everyone's had a good day. So today's video is a little bit different. I'm going to be explaining the difference between outlining and pantsing and what works for me. Stick around to the end because I have a special announcement. Okay, let's get started. So outlining is basically when you plan or prepare ahead of time what you are going to write. People who outline can be extremely detailed to the point where they know the backstory of their world, they know what the world looks like, they have maps, they may have exact ideas of what happens at each stage of the story and character arcs and everything like that. So they can be super detailed and they can be super basic. An outline could basically just be a basic plot premise. Basically could be just key points that you know want to happen in the story. Maybe you know what happens in the beginning, maybe you know what happens in the end, maybe you know a little bit about the middle, but you just put a couple of dot points. Outlining can be very detailed, or it may not be. People are different. What works for one person may not work for another. I know that if I went super detailed, like Tolkien style planning, I would never get my book published, and I would lose interest if I went super detailed with my planning. But I did plan for this. So that's basically what outlining is. Outlining is when you prepare or plan a story ahead of time. It could involve plot, it could involve planning plot, characters, theme, conflict, and the world and setting. Pantsing is the exact opposite. With pantsing, you write. You don't think. You may only start with a basic premise or an idea that sounds interesting. You may know what the character is, but you haven't prepared anything ahead of time, and you just go for it. You just write whatever comes to mind, and you just write and write. And you may keep track of what happens in the story while you're writing, and just write dot points of what happens in certain parts. You may not. You may wait until you finish your first draft before you go back and look at the overall structure. So pantsing is basically flying by the seat of your pants. You don't plan. Generally, you don't plan anything. But pantsers, like outliners, there are different. People are different. There could be pantsers who just go for it and just write whatever comes to mind, and they don't worry about the plot structure and everything like that until the end, when they've got a finished product that they can then edit. And there are pantsers who may write out a scene that happens at the end, and they know, okay, I want that to happen at the end, and they start writing from the beginning and they try and work out how to get to the end. You may have pantsers who do a basic outline of that's like key points. Okay, this happens at the beginning, this is my inciting incident, this is the motivation of my character, why they want whatever they want. I know this happens at the end, and then maybe it. They may just have a couple of dot points. Or they may just literally write a description of the character, because people are different. Okay, what works for one doesn't work for another. Now, me personally, it just depends on what I'm writing. Throughout school, I've been basically taught to plan every single story. I've written without planning before. I've done pantsing. I've basically been taught, okay, you need to plan, you need to outline, and all that stuff through school. And I've had to teach planning as well. So I'm kind of used to planning. But personally for me, if it's a short story, I typically go for it. I start with a basic idea and I just go for it. And I write until I get to the end. And with a short story, when I say short story, sometimes it's like between 5,000 and 10,000 words. What I write, it can be a novella or a mini story. And what I write, I might just write straight, and I might end up finishing the whole story in one sitting if I'm really into it. And if I find as I'm writing, oh, this is really good, and I need to write more of it, it may end up expanding a bit more. Okay. But with short stories, I typically just write and just go for it. If it's a longer short story, I may plan, and when I say plan, I just might write, okay, this is who my character is, this is what they want, this is what the theme is, maybe, and then what happens at the end. I may not even know what happens at the end. It may just be my plan for a short story, 3 or 4 dot points. Poetry, I just write whatever comes to mind, and I worry about grammar and editing and spelling later. So poetry, I pants for poetry because it's short, little snippets of a particular emotional theme or experience, and I just write. Short stories, similar thing. It's very short, and I can sometimes do it in one sitting and just go for it without any planning. Now, with my novel, because I knew when I did NaNoWriMo last year that I wanted to publish my novel, I planned it. I started planning it months ahead of time, and I went very, very detailed with my planning, particularly after watching a video by a couple of YouTube authors that were talking about plotting and talking about retellings in particular, where I got the idea from. And when I did the initial plot or the initial outline, the reason why I did it, why I outlined, is I knew it was going to be a novel. I knew it was going to be at least 50,000 words. And I didn't know if I could keep the story on track if I just went ahead with it without planning anything. I full on plotted it. I analyzed the story. I did a brain dump. I literally plot ideas of what could happen in a story from start to finish. I then organized those ideas into the 3-act structure. I used hero's journey. I used a whole bunch of stuff to plan, and I had a full completed plot for what would happen. There was still wiggle room in between. It was just the main key points and areas that I wanted to happen in the story, so I knew what I was going into until a certain stage. So I knew how it was starting, how it was going to end, and I knew the key points, and I worked hard on that. I did character descriptions, and I went full detailed with the character descriptions. And at this stage, I was actually planning this and plotting this at the same time the students were learning how to plan and write a story. So I was actually using this as like a resource. Now, personally, after writing that plan and trying to write the prologue at that stage, I lost interest until I forced myself to write for NaNoWriMo. I lose interest quickly, which is part of the reason why I plotted in the first place, because if I have to force myself to write, I need to know what's happening. But I still left wiggle room. I used a mix of outlining and pantsing with the story. And I found that it worked. With the outline, I knew roughly what was happening, and I could force myself to write because I would think about maybe one dot point, what was happening in that one chapter, and I'd write. I wouldn't do any more thinking or any more plotting for a specific chapter. I would just write, keeping track of what I've written and what happened in the story. Completely different. But me personally, I find a mix of outlining and pantsing works best for me. Outlining for a novel, for me, I found works good. It works well for me because I know what's happening in certain aspects of the story, and it basically means that I can have a cohesive plot, and I have something that clearly the characters are working towards. Pantsing in specific chapters and scenes works in that I didn't know what was happening in that scene, and I could just write it, and I didn't have to think much. So, me personally, I use a mix. And a lot of people are generally a mix. But there are people who are hard pantsers and just like, nope, they don't plan anything, they just go right ahead. Yeah, so that's a basic, that's basically what outlining and pantsing is. What are you, outliner or a pantser? Do you plan and plot your entire story? Do you just write whatever comes to mind, or are you a mix of both? I'm interested to know. I do read all your comments. I may not respond to all of them, but I definitely do read them. And those of you who did comment on previous videos, thank you so much. but I am a full-time teacher, so responding to comments and managing classes and things like that is a bit tricky when also doing this. Okay, so special announcement. My novel Voiceless I'm doing a cover reveal. I finally have a cover. It is ready for publishing. I am going to do a cover reveal via Facebook Live. I have put the link to that to my Facebook page in the section below. So the cover reveal is going to be live, and I will be going over showing my cover. I'll also be describing. I'll be reading out my blurb. I will also be doing announcements about arcs and arc reading and reviewing, and a little bit more in the live cover reveal. It is on the 10th of September at 4:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, so AEST. So reason for that is it's after work, and it gives me time to set up everything, and yeah. So I will most likely upload the cover reveal to YouTube, but that may take me a bit of time. But yes, my novel is coming out soon, and I'll be doing an announcement on the live cover reveal as to when it actually comes out and when it's available for pre-ordering. Okay. Alright. See ya.